Perfect. So hopefully you can all see my screen now and what I'm going to talk to you about. So thank you all for joining. It's great to see so many of you interested in the project and what we're going to be doing. So yeah, I am Kay Andrews. So I'm one of two peatland project officers working across Northern England on the Making Peatlands Work for Lepidoptera project. You may wonder why peatlands. It's quite a new project for butterfly conservation. Some of you may be aware that over the last few years there's been a really big emphasis on peatland restoration, largely because most of peatland, particularly in England, but also across the whole of the UK, is very degraded. So it's about 80% of England's peatlands are degraded. Scotland is a little bit better. And when our peatlands aren't working properly, when they are degraded, they're actually releasing carbon rather than storing carbon. So there's been a lot of emphasis over the last few years and a lot of government support, a lot of funding as well, to restore our peatland, to reduce the amount of carbon that we're releasing into the atmosphere. And that's been a key kind of focus point as to why a lot of peatland restoration is happening across the whole of the country. And another reason for it as well is for water retention. So that's for water quality, but also for flood risk reasons as well. So yeah, a really big emphasis on the flooding side and the storage of carbon. So where butterfly conservation is coming in and where this project is hoping to link in is making sure that all this peatland restoration work that's happening is also benefiting species recovery as well. And as many of you hopefully all know, butterflies and moths are a really brilliant way to showcase what's going on in an environment and how healthy it is, because they're brilliant indicator species. So that's why we are working with lots of peatland specialists and those delivering restoration on the ground. So yeah, why are we doing it? We want to get a better understanding of how these peatland restoration projects are impacting on species, using species such as the Large Heath, which is kind of a true bog butterfly, as well as other species as well that are associated with those habitats, to get a picture, to build a picture of how these restoration works are impacting on our wildlife, and at what stages they're in good condition, when they're not in so good condition, and the different kind of communities, plant communities, the level of water, for example, how those different levels are influencing what we're seeing as well. And that also includes different interventions that are being made. A lot of our peatland has previously been damaged through peat cutting. There's also been quite a lot of fires and things on our peatlands. So being able to monitor previous management that's happened and what the peatland now looks like too, to get a real understanding of those relationships and how that differs in terms of what we're seeing. The Large Heath I'll come on to a little bit more in a second, but we want to update our current knowledge of the status of Large Heath. Our last comprehensive survey in the north of England for Large Heath was back in the 1990s. A lot of that work was done by Dave Wainwright and Martin Wayne, who many of you will probably know. And lots of these sites haven't been looked at since. So other than areas that volunteers have, and many of potentially you guys that are on the call have been letting us know when you've spotted them, when you've been out and about, we haven't really had very much committed surveys to record Large Heath. And also very little in our upland sites. So a lot of the records that we have are those more accessible ones that are easy to walk, got parking nearby, or they're on popular walking routes. And those kind of really exposed sites, they don't necessarily always have footpaths across them either, on big open moorland and peatland, just haven't been recorded for a very long time. So we want to update our knowledge on the current status of Large Heath as well, and get a better picture of their current distribution across the north of England. As I've mentioned already, we want to look at the success of restoration for peatland and develop best practice guidance for future projects. And we're also going to be working with lots of volunteers. So we'll be, as well as doing surveys, getting people involved in the surveys, we'll also be running some practical conservation days as well. So where we find that there's sites where there's interventions that need to be made, we can do some of those with the help of volunteers as well, hopefully. Sorry, I've got a little bit of a cold, so I keep having to have a drink, so I apologise. So what species are we going to be looking for? So I mentioned the Large Heath. That is one of our kind of key focus species, mainly because it is the true kind of bog species. And as I mentioned, we're missing quite a lot of data on Large Heath. So we are primarily focusing on Large Heath, but as these habitats also include many other important species as well, we do want to look for lots of other things too. There is a couple of other species that aren't specifically targets, but exist at some of the sites that we will be on, so they've been included in here as well. So the Large Heath, the small pearl-bordered fritillary and green hair streak are our target butterflies. And our target moths are the Manchester treble-bar, wood tiger and emperor moth. And then across some of our sites, we do know that there is historical records of argent and sable, the sundew plume, rosy marsh moth, and also the Howarth's minor. So depending on some of the locations that we're in, we'll also be keeping our eye out for those as well. So the Large Heath, I've said a number of times already, it's the only true bog butterfly. It's found on lowland raised bogs and also upland blanket bog and sort of damp acid moorland. We haven't found it super high, although I do think up in Scotland they have actually managed to get it to almost 600 metres now, I believe. And it is expected that it is a species that may eventually start to move further and further north, but we will see. So we may start to see them creeping up the hills a little bit more to what they are currently. The larvae feed predominantly on hare's tail cotton grass, but they do also use common cotton grass as well and jointed rush. And in the North York Moors in particular, they seem to use common cotton grass over there quite happily, whereas in Cumbria and Lancashire, they tend to use hare's tail cotton grass mostly. We're not quite sure what the reason for that is in the difference, but that's how it seems to be at the moment. Excuse me. So recognising the Large Heath, it's a really earthy coloured butterfly. So it's really, really nice, kind of woody orange and brown colour. They're quite good to us in that when they're at rest, they actually sit with their wings closed, which you'll find out why that's really good for us when we're looking for them and trying to identify them in a second. And pay attention to those curved row of eye spots, which will be important when I on for the next slide. So there are 3 subspecies of Large Heath. The ones we are probably most likely to see, the people that are on this call, depending on how far away you live. But if you live in the north of England, we are most likely to see the Polyderma, which is the one in the middle, or the Davos. And if you're up in Scotland, then we have the almost spotless Scotica Large Heath as well. And we believe that the dots or spots differ due to predation. And they think that as the environment is getting colder, they're moving around a lot more, and so they're the other way around. They're moving around a lot more in the warmer climate. So the Davos and the Polyderma are moving around lots more, and so they're more susceptible to predation. And so these eye spots are a bit of a distraction to birds for targeting their wings rather than their bodies, and also to scare them off. And that's the theory behind why the Scottish one has much less spots, and there's variation as they're slightly less active and slightly less susceptible to predators. I'm not quite sure how they've worked that out, but that's what I've been told. So those are the three different ones, but mostly we tend to see the Polyderma, but we will sometimes see the Davos as well. So distribution. So this map that I've done on the left is for the north of England. It has missed off a bit of Chester, but unfortunately there is no Large Heath down there. Our most southerly site in the north of England is the Manchester mosses, which is quite interesting. Some of you may or may not be aware. The Lancashire Wildlife Trust carried out a reintroduction. So that was back in 2017, I think, possibly earlier. They took some Large Heath from Heysham up near Lancaster, and they reintroduced the Large Heath to some mosses that had restoration works carried out in Manchester. And historically, the Large Heath was actually called the Manchester Argus, and there used to be lots and lots of Large Heath many, many years ago around Manchester. So yeah, it has been reintroduced down there, and there's lots of research going on currently on how successful that's been, how the population is doing, and if there's any need to add any more diversity to that population and how they're faring. So that's quite interesting, and hopefully this time next year maybe I might be able to give you an update on how those reintroduction individuals in that population are doing. So our next kind of site is around near Doncaster. So some of you may be familiar with the Humberhead Levels project. So this is Crowell and Fatfield Moor. They have some great monitoring going on over there, and it's a peatland restoration project that happened quite ago now, maybe 15 years ago. And they are very good at recording. They have transects set up across the moors. And yeah, they have Large Heath across those as well. The North York Moors. So we can see we've got a really lovely big cluster of records over there. We do have some of you on the call may potentially walk the transect, but we do have a transect over in the North York Moors called Fenbog. Another stronghold site for them over there is called Moth. Sadly, those of you who live over that way will probably know about the Flying Dales fire that took place at the end of last year. And unfortunately, it has potentially had quite an impact on the Large Heath over there. My task, hopefully with the help of some volunteers, this year is to head over there and actually survey quite a lot of the sites on the western side of the North York Moors to get a better understanding of what their current distribution is, so that we can then try to build a picture of what the impact of the fire may have been, and also see how the damage of the fire, how it's recovering, how the plants are recovering, and where we might be able to do any interventions if needed, for Large Heath being able to move back into those areas if they've been lost. So that's the North York Moors. I will swing straight back up to Northumberland. So you can see there's a really lovely big network of sites up in Northumberland. Pretty much with a few gaps in between, but pretty much a full big nice band that goes all the way across to kind of Brampton area and the Solway Mosses, which is probably a good time for me to say my colleague Charlotte, who is also working on the project with me, covers that area. So she's got quite a task covering all of the Northumberland sites, and also into the Solway Mosses area and around Carlisle. And then you'll start to see there's some sporadic records around the top of Cumbria and into the Lake District National Park. A lot of these records are quite old, particularly in the kind of more central in Lake District and the top of the national park. They're all quite old. We are working with various partners in the area to look out for them. So one site in particular is Skiddaw. So those of you who keep in the loop with big projects or might live in Cumbria or nearby, Cumbria Wildlife Trust recently bought Skiddaw, and they do have plans to restore the peatland bog there. And the area that they are restoring is where we have historical records of Large Heath. So that is really exciting in potential, if there is Large Heath still there, or it may be that it's a site that's considered for future colonisation, and there's some other populations that aren't too far away as well. And then we've got across the south a band of lowland raised bogs across the south of Cumbria. So these are places like Falshaw, Meathop. We've also got the Dudden Mosses as well. So we've got quite a nice band again of lowland raised bogs across the bottom of Cumbria as well. And then a slightly isolated population at the Forest of Bowland. So any of you who know it well, the kind of Goodber Common area and Salter Fell. So they're kind of the key sites for Large Heath over there. And then we've got Heysham at Lancaster as well. So that's where our Large Heath, what we know of Large Heath currently. But as I say, we need to update a lot of these records are from the 1990s. So the really, really dark blue dots are our most recent records, with the lighter ones being the older records. Some of you may have noticed that there's a few sporadic ones in the Yorkshire Dales. They are a bit of an anomaly. We potentially think that they may have been a reintroduction or an attempted reintroduction at some point. But but yeah, there haven't been any confirmed sightings since. So there's just a couple of sporadic ones in the Dales. Although we'd be very happy if they did manage to make their way into the Dales and across the landscape, but we'll see. And nationally, you can see from the map on the right, they're also kind of on the north of Wales, some in Northern Ireland, very few in Shropshire, but most are Northern England and then up into Scotland. And as I mentioned slightly earlier, it is something that we are finding is that they are a species that are going to start slowly moving north with the climate. Their biggest risks, I would say, has been the degradation of peat in the past, climate implications in future. So they're very susceptible to changes. So things like flooding, if the levels aren't right, they lay their eggs right at the bottom of the cotton grasses, and they can survive so much of flooding and even get frozen. But if it's consecutive and for really long drawn out periods, then they can actually get kind of flushed out of an environment as well. And obviously draining. So there's a lot of drainage that's happened over the years, whether it's for agricultural reasons or if it's, access reasons and things where like bits of land have been drained to make things more accessible. And a lot of the work now is to try and reverse some of those impacts and make these habitats wetter again. I mentioned the main food plants being harestail cottongrass, and they also like to use cross-leaved heath. So when we're looking at what a good habitat for large heath is, we want a mix. So we've found that where there's a really good sphagnum moss layer, that's an indicator in itself of a healthier bog and a healthier hydrological system as well. The presence of harestail cottongrass and then the presence of a nectar source as well. So it's cross-leaved heath is a popular one, so that's one that we will always look for, but other things like bog asphodel are things to look for as well. So yeah, I've said already they are suffering due to a decline in habitat, mostly from drainage. Peat extraction, the one I missed off, which is particularly important up in the Scotland area, but also in Northumberland quite a lot too, is afforestation as well. So a lot of where the peatlands exist are often on the edges of forest, and that we're increasingly seeing as the peat is drying out, the forests are just creeping in. And a lot of managers are struggling to kind of keep them back. And that's quite a big task. And sometimes where volunteers are coming in as well with helping with that small scrub removal as well. So they've declined in England by about 25% in the last kind of 10 to 15 years. They are classed as endangered. And yeah, it's really important for us to get out and figure out what's going on with these guys, what their current status is, and some interventions of what we can do to help them. And you can help too. So how are we looking for them? What are we doing? Some of you may be familiar with these methodologies already, but timed counts, so going out onto a site and walking a route and recording the amount of time that you're there and counting large heath whilst you walk, usually during the peak flight season, once or twice during the peak flight season. weekly transects. So some of you probably walk transects or have been involved in transects, but weekly transects happen either throughout the whole season, so from April to September, someone or a group of people split it between them to walk the same route every week. We also have single species transects as well, which are slightly less committal and means that you only walk the transect during the flight period. So it's like 6 to 7 weeks that's walked instead. And habitat assessments. So all those things that I spoke about before, the sphagnum moss, the hare's tail cottongrass, all of those things. We're looking at those and how much water there is and assessing what's present, what's not present, and how good is this habitat for Large Heath. And from that, we can then speak to landowners as to things that they can do to try and improve that habitat for Large Heath. I will mention this again later, but we will be running some training as well. So if any of you on the call have signed up already or would like to volunteer and would like to find out a bit more and learn about the species, we will be running some identification training and also on survey training as well. And equally, if any of you have got any information about Large Heath sites or any of the other species that I'm going to talk about in a moment, we are very, very happy to hear from you. You guys who are out there and live on the sites that you live nearby or enjoy walking on regularly will probably know things that we may not. So we're always super happy to hear from you and share any knowledge that you've got on these species as well. So yeah, just to give you an idea of how we're going to monitor when there's such big landscapes, we're going to have a mix of transects in an area as well as some timed counts, which will give us a really good basis of data to work out what the status is in those areas. So yeah, I spoke about the habitat assessment already. That's just a little bit about what the farm looks like and some of the things that we look at. So you can see the waterlogging is on there, what mosses are present, what grasses are present. So there's some of the surveying that we're doing. And that's myself and Charlotte and also Martin Wayne, which some of you may know, carrying out a habitat assessment together a few weeks ago. So green hair streak, that's one of our other species. Yeah, one of our first species on the wing. They can be found in quite a variety of habitats. They feed on quite a lot of different things, so they're less specialist than some of our other butterflies, but really lovely to spot. A nice engagement species, and we do want to know more about them, and unfortunately it does seem like they may possibly be in decline locally as well, so they're really important for us to be recording as well. So we've included those to keep our eyes out whilst we're in these heathland and boggy habitats. They also use the cross-leaved heath, which the Large Heath use as well as bilberry and gorse. So we're looking out for those too. The small pearl-bordered fritillary, which I know some of you here are very familiar with. A species I've worked with before, a lovely butterfly. So we're going to be looking for those whilst we're out and about as well. And they like marsh violet and common dog violet. They're actually one of the species that may potentially recover quite well in the North York moors following the fire. I haven't managed to get up there yet, but I will be doing soon. And it is something, one of my tasks is to kind of wander along all the wet areas and see how much of the violets might be really booming after getting rid of basically all the Molinia, all the grasses, and all the tusky grasses might just give the violets a bit of a boost and allow them to spread, which in time will benefit the small pearl, hopefully. So the focus moth species, we've got the emperor moth, which we will be surveying using pheromone layers. The wood tiger moth, which we'll be just looking for during the daytime, and also the Manchester treble bar. So we'll be doing a mix of hopefully doing some moth trapping on sites as well, and also trying to look for keeping our eye out for things whilst we're out working on the bogs as well. But we're hoping to have some kind of case study sites with a mix of peatland restoration stages where we can set up moth traps as well and see how the species assemblage changes at different times scales of peatland restoration and after different methodology. So if it's been a ditch that's been blocked, for example, or if it's bunds that have been created. So we're hoping to get a real mix of data to try and build up a picture of how all these different methodology have an impact. Oh, yeah. So that's just a nice video that Dave Wainwright did using a pheromone layer, which I'm quite looking forward to actually because I haven't done that before. So been told many times about people going out with pheromone layers and getting lovely emperor moths, and I've never done it myself, so I'm looking forward to starting to do that soon. So as a bit of a side project to this, we're also going to be starting a citizen science project. So some of you will probably use iRecord or will be aware of iRecord. You can set up projects on there. So we're going to be setting up a project and asking people to record hairy caterpillars. So it's just a nice way to engage people in peatlands to look out for the little things, and also very important data for us to find out about all these critters and where they are. So we're looking for wood tiger, fox moth, the vapourer, northern egger. We've added emperor moth, although it does have some hairs, but it's not super hairy. But we have just added emperor moth in there as well, and the drinker moth. So we'll be encouraging people, and that's just more kind of casual sightings, and just getting people engaged and out there looking for things, and hopefully a stepping stone into getting them to record more things. So just to summarise, some of the things, the ways you can get involved. So the Large Heath surveys by time counts. There's habitat condition assessments. If you quite like vegetation and getting your nose to the ground, then you can get involved in our habitat condition assessments. Transect walks, so that could be regularly walking a route yourself or joint with other volunteers as well. Surveys of other butterflies, so green hairstreak and small pearl-bordered fritillary. Again, they're going to be timed counts or transect walks, depending on your location. Moth recording is more of a casual sightings, and emperor moth using pheromone layers. We do have guidance and training coming out on how to do that as well. And we'll have training for all of the species and different methodology as well. So and that will be online as well as in person. So there'll be lots of opportunity for people to learn if they're not feeling like they can head straight out there and start looking for any of these things. I mentioned the citizen science already. And then Bog Squad is our practical conservation days that we'll have come winter time, and leads quite nicely onto, just wanted to kind of chat a little bit about a second element to our project. So the majority of the project is what I've just spoken about, but we are also working on the dark bordered beauty moth. So those of you who don't know about the dark bordered beauty moth, It's a very rare and specialist moth. It's currently only got one site left in England, which is Strensall Common in Yorkshire. And then the other two sites are up in Scotland. The numbers have declined massively, and it's really struggling at its remaining site in Yorkshire. I was chatting to Martin actually just before you all joined, and the Transect data there this year, the numbers are very low. It's been hit by quite a lot. The habitat there, it's had multiple fires. It's had, lots going on. So we are working with the university, with volunteers, with the landowners, to, and also the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, to hopefully start a project to breed more of them, and hopefully spread their range. So their food plant is creeping willow in England, and at their Strensall Common site, we've actually created what's called gen guards. So they're like metal fences that we've, or metal cages. We've created metal cages that are kind of 2 by 2 meters that we've put around the creeping willow to try and protect them from grazing pressure, which has worked. And you can really clearly see how the creeping willow inside the gen guards is faring compared to those outside of the gen guards. The plant itself seems to really not react very well to grazing. We've seen quite a lot of plants where they have been grazed that their growth just gets stunted and then they just don't grow anymore. But if we discovered that if you cut them, then they spurt quite well. So we're going to be trialing just going around and chopping some so that hopefully some of them will recover and start to grow again, and not just stay at this stunted growth level. We're going to be moving some of the cages around as well, and creating some more, so that we're hopefully protecting more of their habitat. But we're also looking at other areas where there's creeping willow and looking at feasibility to increase its range in other places. So we've got a few neighbouring sites, but we've also been looking in Northumberland, which is historically the last site, other site in England that it was. And there's quite a lot of creeping willow in quite good condition as well. And the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland have been working for the last few years on captive breeding of the moth, and they've been really successful with that, and releasing it in to a few sites in Scotland. We've got a few questions we need to answer first before we start with breeding with the Yorkshire population. In Scotland, they feed on aspen, and we don't know if the Scottish population will eat creeping willow. We also don't know how different they are in terms of genetics. So we need to work out logistics of how many individuals we may need to catch in order to be successful with their breeding. So we've got lots of questions for the Royal Zoological team, which we are going to see in a couple of weeks' time. So we're starting to, hopefully figure out some of these questions, and we're hoping that we may be able to start breeding for the Yorkshire population. And that, paired with the habitat kind of restorations, we've started to cultivate some creeping willow as well, so that we can plant more creeping willow, potentially extend its range to other areas, and also improve the habitat of where it is as well. A lot of it is also to do with the hydrology as well. It could be a lot wetter, and it's actually, the creeping willow has recovered really well after the fire. And I think it not having any competition of the grasses and stuff around it. So there's a lot of new creeping willow coming through, which the dark-bodied beauty moth will potentially very much like in another season or so. So yeah, so that's all exciting of potential things coming up. And if you're based over in the Yorkshire area or you're willing to travel, then that's another bit of work that you could get involved in as well. Whether it's the practical conservation stuff on the ground, or if it's helping us to monitor them as well. So there's lots to keep you updated on and get you involved in. So I'll just finish because I know I've been chatting to you all for quite a while now. I'll just finish by saying if you are interested in volunteering and you haven't signed up already, the volunteer role is now live on our website. If you have any, I'll have time in a second for questions anyway, but if you come away from the talk and have some burning questions, please do get in touch with me. And there's also Charlotte as well that you can get in touch with if you've got any site-specific information or anything like that. And yeah, we'll have lots of training days coming up. We'll have some events and things as well, which we'll let your branches know all about so that they can get the information out to you. But yeah, lots of exciting stuff, loads of information, loads of things for you to get involved in. And I'll stop sharing my screen and then you can all hopefully and ask me any questions you've got. Bear with me.
Thank you, Kay. Fascinating talk. If people want to ask Kay some questions, please can use the chat button, which is at the bottom of the screen. Post them in there, and we'll ask Kay to address them. Kay, first of all, I mean, when you say website and the information there, where is that on the BC website?
The Butterfly Conservation website, yeah.
Is there anything people need to specifically search for? Is it the Lepidoptera, Peatland?
Yeah, even if you Google making peatlands work for Lepidoptera, it should come up.
Okay. Question about Large Heath. What sort of area of habitat does that species need for it to survive? Have you got any ideas? Because obviously the areas are quite big, and obviously the records, certainly in the North York Moors, are quite spread out.
Yeah, that it's a great question. I don't know is my true answer, but they don't travel very far.
No.
So that's why we've, even from an out-facing look and from a big map, it looks like there's a really good band, but when you look closer in, they are quite isolated. So if I take the South Cumbria mosses as an example, there's on the map as we were seeing it, it looks like a quite strong band across the bottom of South Cumbria, but there's actually quite big gaps between the mosses. So they're kind of in little isolated pockets, where it's quite exciting. These places like the North York Moors and Northumberland, where there's the opportunity to potentially join up and connect those areas, because there isn't big sort of barriers. It's more the habitat quality that's stopping them from crossing over, if that makes sense. So a lot of the peatland restoration works that are going on in those areas are quite exciting, because it could lead to the farming of various colonies being in one large habitat, which would be great.
Okay. See whether we've got any other questions. Can you see the questions there? There isn't really anything. Somebody's asked about inquiring about training in the dissection of moths. That's not necessarily something you're going to be able to answer. Diola, the easiest way to do that is to probably go on our branch website, Yorkshire Branch Butterfly Conservation, and look on the contacts page there for one of the micro or macro well, particularly the micro moth recorder, he'll be able to help you out with something like that. So, you see Danny's
Question from
question?
Danny, sorry.
Yeah.
So I have created a map of where all the Large Heath sites are. Um, it is just a Google map and it will be going on our website soon. So the project page that I just mentioned on the Butterfly Conservation website, which is Making Peatlands Work for Lepidoptera, the project name. The Google map will appear on there and that has all the sites on. Anyone who's signed up as interested to be a volunteer, I will be sending a link to that out to people as well so that people can look at where they might want to survey. And I have made a list of where the current existing transects are on that as well. Strensall Common isn't included in it just because it's slightly separate. But there is a transect at Strensall Common. And if you are specifically interested in that site, I can put you in touch with the people that currently walk the transect there.
Can you see the question there about the grazing pressure on creeping willow?
Yeah. Yeah, it is livestock. So there hasn't been huge changes in terms of the stocking levels over the last few years, but how the livestock are using the site has changed partly because of climate as well. But as the site's got drier, the sheep have been moving around the site a lot differently. So areas that they didn't used to graze, they've now been spending a lot of time in. So it's become a newer problem as the grazing pressure. And it's not because there's more sheep there. And the sheep levels are relatively low because it's the Triple SI site and it's got a Natural England agreement. There has been some changes and there's been some cattle introduced as well, and they're having quite a good impact on the site. And we are working with the farmer there. And interestingly, when the fire went through, can't remember if it was last year or the year before, the sheep just concentrated all their grazing on all the new shoots that were coming back from the fire, which has actually allowed other areas of the site to recover a little bit as well. So there's always that relationship and different things that we can't always control with the movement of grazing and also kind of those climate changes and stuff as well. But yeah, we are working with the landowners and the farmer who has his livestock on there because it is a common on the best way forward for improving creeping willow habitat, making the site a little bit wetter, which will also help that they currently have a problem with conifers taking over the site as well. So if they make it a bit wetter, that will help with that problem as well. Pete's question about peat. I don't know. It is something that we would quite like to look at, but it would probably be something we'd need a student to take on. Or potentially we are working with different peatland partnerships on all the data that they collect as part of their restoration. So it is something that we could potentially start to record. It's quite a good point, actually. I will make a note. But yeah, it is something that we have thought about recording as part of our research into the impacts that it's having as to how deep the peat is, to what vegetation species are there, and to how many large heath we're seeing in those areas as well. So yeah, I'm sure that it is important. Vegetation sometimes does give us indications of that. but yeah, if we can work with the peatland partnerships on getting those bits of data, because they'll do peat depth analysis sometimes, as well as kind of the hydrological stuff. We have been working with Natural England on how we can incorporate some of the key peatland restoration monitoring into our habitat assessments and vice versa, so that hopefully we're all looking at the same things and getting some really important data for everyone.
You see Julie's question about sightings.
They can go through to your county recorders is totally fine. Anything that goes to your county recorders will eventually make it to us. So yeah, carry on sharing with county recorders is great. If we've actually set up on iRecord that any sightings that go through iRecord as well, we are really easily able to view and pull those out as well. So any records that go to your county recorders will get. So yeah, that's great. Apologies that I keep coughing as well. I'm kind of fighting off a little bit of a cold at the moment. I think that might be it for questions.
Don't think there's anything else you want to say, Kay?
I just thank you all for spending an evening listening to me. If you think of any other questions, do feel free to get in touch with me. And yeah, if you would like to volunteer or get involved, you know where I am, and I will send updates to all of the branches on different opportunities on training and project updates and things like that as well.
That'd be great. Thank you, Kate. If I can ask Nick to stop the recording now.